My name is Brenda Councill. I'm the Executive Director at Mandarin Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to Brenda Councill celebrating 50 years. We are so appreciative to have you all in the audience and coming and spending time with us leading up to this program. And I'm sure you've had a wonderful time speaking with Brenda, viewing some of her work. And when I talked to her about doing a pop-up exhibition, she said, well, it might be tricky because some of my best work most recently is on domed ceilings many miles away, spanning 2,500 square feet. And so we couldn't bring that here, but we did our best, and Brenda brought some photographs of these wonderful large-scale works. But before we begin our program this evening, I want to find out, for the audience, how many of you are here at a Mandarin Museum program for the very first time? Oh, very good. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. We hope it will not be your last. And I wanted to thank our many board members who are in the audience this evening, our many members. If you're a Mandarin Museum member, would you raise your hand? Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Members like you are what help us keep our programming and operations afloat. And we know that the many benefits of being a member of Mandarin Museum are fantastic, but the museum benefits from your sustained support throughout the year. And so if you are not a member and you're interested in becoming one, you can speak to me after the program. And let's see, let me just go ahead and introduce our guest of honor this evening. Brenda Councill. She was raised in Mandarin and spent many, many, many years here. And her career as an artist has spanned 50 years. Now, she made a name for herself in Jacksonville with her popular series of limited edition prints and drawings of historic Mandarin homes and sites, which you can see these are lining the walls of the community club, which we didn't even tell the community club to put them up here. They just did that all on their own. And since this time, and this was in the 1980s, her career has gone in different trajectories, and she's been exploring different mediums, including painting, sculpture, and mixed media. She is now internationally known, and her work is in the collections of private individuals, public collections, and corporate collections all around the United States and the globe. Now, I mentioned she is a longtime Mandarin resident. She now resides in Blowing Rock, North Carolina, which, if you've never been to Blowing Rock, it's such a wonderful little city. But her heart has remained with the Mandarin community, and so she's here with us today to not only talk to us about her 50-year career and how that has evolved over time, but she's also here to talk to us about an exciting new project that she's working on for the Mandarin community and for Mandarin Museum, Harriet Beecher Stowe in Mandarin. And I will let her tell you all about that. So without further ado, here is Brenda Councill.
Well, hello everyone. I'm going to, as I'm speaking, I'm going to exit out of this program, and we are going to start a presentation that I prepared to talk about clay to bronze. And I think in talking with many of you earlier in the evening, it was evident that this process is confusing to a lot of people, and it is a very complex process. And it begins with the concept. And of course, if you've been to the Mandarin Museum, you will see the little model, scale model that I sculpted. And it's really the drawing in clay. That is a second rendition that we've gone through, and there may be some slight changes to the actual bronze when, when we get to that point. We can change it up until it goes to the foundry. But what I'm trying to capture is the essence of Harriet Beecher Stowe in Mandarin. When I walked in the community club today, I had not been in this building for at least 25 years. And I was astounded to see my work still hanging in here from the 1980s. And it was just a pleasure to be in here and to understand the legacy of Harriet Beecher Stowe. And so this sculpture is really to honor her presence in Mandarin. The 20 years that she spent off and on here is so important for us to recognize. And I'm just so privileged and proud to be able to sculpt such a famous figure internationally and a historical figure of this magnitude. And she's a woman, so that really means a lot to me. And if you caught a glimpse of the end of the program on the loop that was running for the last hour, I will be doing a National Women's Monument in the state of Ohio. Now that won't be in the ground in probably 2026, but you will all get an invitation to the unveiling of that Women's Monument in Columbus, Ohio. And it's on the State House grounds, so it's a really large project. And so you will each be getting an invitation for that in 2026, so mark it on your calendar. So let me begin by illustrating how I first began the actual model. And the model really is my way of articulating every detail of the finished model, even in large scale. So as you see here, I'm using aluminum wire, the armature is foam, the canvas that I just draped on her dress is all part of the process. Now here I'm working on one of the small boys that will be sitting on the crate, the Harriet Beecher Stowe orange crate. And seated next to the little armature is a model that I use, and it's actually a flexible scale model of a superhero. So anyway, I get the scale from that little model. And so when I work on a sculpture, of course every sculpture is different. Sculpture and how they approach a sculpture is different, but we all have the same intent. We want to capture the features of our model. And in this case, it's tough because a historical model, I can't, I have to envision many of her facial features. Photographs don't always reveal all of that 360-degree view I need of her head, so I have to implement in this case. Now, her facial features are really that of, she's a woman in her 60s. So that, I'll be working on capturing, and you see the work in progress. So again, I'm back to the boys, and you see I've got a scale that I'm using off to the right of the slide. And so I make a constant reference to that, and that helps me build the anatomy. Now here I'm working on the little bench that she's sitting on, and it's made out of a hard foam, so I can work with it easier than wood. And I have a filler, it's a polymer resin that I use as a filler, and you'll see me use that throughout the demonstration. So here I am sculpting the actual piece, the details, I've really tried hard to render the folds of the skirt. A lot of these early details happen in the model, and of course I'll emulate them when I do it in life size. And if everything works out, I will be setting up a studio this winter in the old store in post office. So you can come by and see me sculpt the piece from the armature, the beginning of the piece until the very end. So it'll be actually very educational. Here was another rendition I did. You'll see I made a miniature bench that emulated one of the benches that was actually in her yard. But we thought this might be a difficult design because the bench doesn't allow for people to, you could fit only one person on it, where the bench we have designed, you could sit 2 or 3 people that can have their photograph taken with Harriet Beecher Stowe. But these are just ideas that I do different renditions, and so you see on the stone bench, she's more visible, and we felt like this might be a better approach. And you can see the detail of the 2 young boys that have just come in from the orange groves, and Harriet Beecher Stowe is sitting down with them and reading to them, giving them maybe a little lesson. It wouldn't have been, she would have interacted, we believe, with the people that worked in her groves, and so this is the idea, to capture that she is an integral part of this community. And the little orange crate, you'll see visibly, and the actual bag of oranges. I have already worked on this armature, and I made before I will add the clay. And this little orange sack is made out of canvas, and I use a polymer resin coating to stiffen this, and it has to be stiff before I add the clay. And the whole idea behind an armature is to keep it very lightweight, because clay is very heavy. And so the thinner the clay is, the less weight it's gonna weigh. It's easier for me to transport. But also, when I've put in these initial forms, it really makes my job easier when I start sculpting the oranges and the actual folds in the clay. This helps me a great deal. So if you'll look at the little crate, you get a glimpse of that here. And you see that the crate is upturned. And that crate I actually built. And this is the crate that the bronze foundry will use to cast from. And I've carved in oranges from Harriet Beecher Stowe, Mandarin, Florida. And that's how her crates looked. This would have been a typical design of the period. So I'm trying to get the details right. And I need this to sit the boys on too. So here I am working on the head that you saw up front. And this is, the base of the head is a simple styrofoam ball. And then I just start scaling the face out, and you'll see tiny little wooden picks in her ears. Those are to help me mark her ear, and they're on the right and the left side, so that I'll know the markings of that when I'm working around the head. I do it for the eyes and the nose and marks on the lips, so it just helps me considerably form the facial features. And again, her early stages, you can see the little wooden pins in there that I use as a reference for me. And so I'm starting to form the face, and in the background, of course, you see all the portraits I think have ever been made of her, but this is in her period. These portraits are from the period that she would have been here in Mandarin. And again, this is a side view, and if you noticed on the sculpture out front, her hair right now is a little too weighty, so I'll take clay off and I'll work on it continuously. I probably have another month on that face. I've got a lot of details to render. But again, that's just the beginning. So the next step I'm going to illustrate here is how do you enlarge the model to the scale of the piece. Now the easy way to do it, and this is a trade secret, a lot of sculptors won't show this to you, but on the right you see the figure that is half covered in the gray clay. The other half is foam. That foam is a laser cut. It's called a CNC cutting machine, and you photograph the model precisely with a laser. That is transformed into a foam replica, and then I can add clay to it. That's the easy way. I'm not going to do this in the case of the Harriet Beecher Stowe sculpture. I'm going to build the armature out of PVC and aluminum and some foam parts. But we're going to eliminate this step because I want the flexibility of changing maybe her skirt a little bit, maybe her vest top. I want to be able to adapt and change if I need to. And sometimes working with foam on this scale doesn't let you do that. So again, this is an example of a sculpture I did of a life-size figure. And I'm just putting the finishing touches on this piece. And it's a long, arduous process. So it really will take several months to even get to this stage. Now, back to the crate. So here I am building the crate, and I'm using a small Dremel drill to carve in the details. And then I use a hard shellac to coat, because this will be, shellac's the best thing to use, because when they put the latex paint the latex to make the rubber mold, the shellac protects it. And so that's the stage of making this prop, which will be directly cast in bronze. Now, when I deliver the clay bodies, the boys and Harriet Beecher Stowe, to the foundry, immediately they will paint on this rubber, and they will cover every square inch of the finished sculpture. And that makes a mother mold, which will be used to cast the wax. And this gives you an idea of how that rubber mold is encased in a shell. In this case, it's fiberglass, and that's strong enough to hold the wax, but not the bronze. So this is the first stage in creating the exact replica of the sculpture. So once the wax is poured into this shell, you come up with the wax heads. And this is a project I'm just finishing up now, and it's been bronze, so I'll be able to show you how this all works. But I am now taking the wax, and I am honing every single detail, because this is my last chance before it's cast in bronze. So every detail has to be captured in the wax that might have been missed in that initial cast process. Now, you look at this part of the face. The hat's been taken off. That'll be welded on later, and it's cast as a separate component. But these little wax rods are called sprues, and you see one right under his neck. That is where the bronze will be poured into the mother cast, and the wax will be melted away, and the bronze will displace the wax. But you have to make sure the air bubbles come out, so we have these little channels that have to be put in. So once the wax is done and the sprues are done, that wax is dipped into a big vat. And it's a vat called slurry, and it's a stucco mix, and it hardens around the actual wax. Remember, the wax is now my master model that I've perfected. So once it's hardened, and it takes a few days to harden, the big moment is the actual bronze pour. And a sculpture this size with 3 figures, and the orange sack and the crate, they all have to be torn apart. And it's the saddest thing, because I'll see an arm laying on a table, and a hand on a table, and the head's cut off. So my whole sculpture's in pieces. And I'm thinking, how are they going to put this back together? So that's a big moment, and I actually have been there to watch this, and it's really amazing. So after this is done, of course it cools, and I come back 2 days later to the foundry, and this is one of my sculptures that they break the mold, and then it comes out and it looks very brassy, and that's okay. But we're going to put it back together. We're going to do grinding, welding, and chasing, and we're going to put the entire piece back together. And that would be this stage. And we're shifting back to a life-size sculpture that I did, and this guy was in pieces, so they've welded them all back together, and I'm coming to inspect him and making sure that, everything is the way I want it. And it's difficult, because there might be a few burrs on it we have to grind out, and I stand there with them and help them. So it's really an interactive sequence of events. And then this is an exciting part too. We're almost finished. And this is when we apply the chemical patina. And the chemical patinas actually are quite toxic, so I help with this stage a little bit, but there's a woman I work with that really, she knows the kind of patinas I like. So we are working on that now. It takes about a day to do one section. This is just one section of a 3-headed bust here that she's working on. So again, I'll be at the foundry for 2 weeks working daily on all of these processes. And this is the finished patina after we have gotten it the way I want it. Again, things have to dry. We can't reapply until surfaces are just right, and then it's sort of baked on. And then the last thing is I get to wax it. And I put 2 coats of wax, and I make it nice and shiny. And that is the end of the process. But, it's a long one, and this sculpture will be at the foundry for 5 months. And so I'll be traveling back and forth, checking on Harriet Beecher Stowe. And that's basically, in a nutshell, how you transition from soft clay to impermeable bronze that will last thousands of years. And the process has not changed in thousands of years, and it's called the lost wax process because of the wax that we use in the process. So that is the end. I will try to answer them, or any comments. Welcome those. Jim?
Brenda, what do you like to do in your spare time?
You know, I enjoy my work so much, and I go hiking a lot of the time. Of course, I enjoyed scuba diving for many years, and so that's still a big hobby. And but honestly, I just work a lot. Yes.
Will they stay that same color, or will they turn greenish with age?
Good question. Well, you've seen many bronzes that have patinaed, that verdigris, that green, and in certain atmospheres they'll turn greener, in other atmospheres they'll turn a bronzy brown, much deeper than this. If a bronze is not maintained, that's what happens. Now, some people like that patina, and they like that living finish. But in the case of the work that I'm doing, I like to maintain that bronze, and doing that once a year, I'm going to come back to Mandarin and wash and wax this piece for you guys. So you don't have to worry about the maintenance, but yes, I'm going to come back and wash and wax it, which is essentially all you have to do to maintain bronze. And I use a special wax, carnauba waxes and beeswax. So, yeah, it's a heavy-duty wax. So, but that's always a question, you know, how's it going to be maintained? How much does it cost? It's not going to cost you anything, because I'm going to come back and do it.
I'm just interested in terms of the clay that you use when you're doing the maquette. You know, when normally, like when you're doing ceramics, you can be using earthenware, or porcelain, or whatever. But obviously, you're using something that stays malleable enough that you can kind of continue to work on it over numerous days.
That's correct, yeah, and a great observation, because the clay is so important. The clay that I've chosen is oil-based. It never dries. It is not water-based. It's oil-based. But I have to heat it up very gently to get the consistency I want. And I use a big crock pot. And in fact, my sister is here, and she gave me that crock pot, and I'm still using it because it's just the right temperature. So it's just an old slow cooker, and that's exactly what I use. And it just gives me the right temperature, and it's so malleable. Now, once it hardens on my armature, I have to carve back out. And so that's where the real work begins. The clay does eventually harden, and then I just will carve it with the different tools that I think I have on display there. So, I'll take clay off, I'll put it back on, but it has to be the right temperature, yeah, so. And the brand is a Chavant clay. A lot of the really great clay, there are some terrific clays made here in the US. There are a lot that come from Europe. Certain parts of Europe have specialty clays. But the clay I use is Chavant brand, and it's made in the USA, so.
If somebody offered you a commission and said you could sculpt anybody you'd like, who'd you pick?
Oh, gosh. Probably Queen Elizabeth I, who's an ancestor of mine, so, yeah. It would be a woman, for sure. So, Patrick.
Brenda, looking back with your exhibits on your earlier work over there, particularly the work on the domes, I'm interested in how do you take into affect the curvature of the dome when you're doing the painting and you're close to it, or how you model that into it in your preliminary studies?
That is an excellent question, and it's a mathematical question. So using geometry and, using what I use is when I have to scale a piece, if it's 100 feet off the ground, there are formulas now that you can use. But if you look closely at that photograph, that caret in the photograph is 18 feet. So the trick with the long caret, that I'm up in this dome painting on a curvature ceiling, it's an illusion, because I painted the tip of the caret almost the same size as the stalk of the caret that should be the thicker part in real life. So I have to balance that, so when I'm looking at it on a curve and from 110 feet down, I have to compensate for that. The trick that helps me the most is using a camera lens. And I can use a certain millimeter camera lens, and I can look at my piece from 100 feet down and make sure that perspective is correct, and that camera lens corrects it for me. And then I go back in, and I may have to heighten one side of an apple because it looks, off shoot. But the two hardest pieces in that big dome, which is 3,600 square feet of painted surface, that dome was a 6-month project. Now, I finished it in 3 months and got a big bonus for that. But the carrot and the pineapple were the hardest, and that is because of the perspective that I had to continually compensate for. Sandy?
Brenda, tell us a little bit about the evolution of your art, starting with this beautiful Mandarin series, which many of us have in our homes, and evolving to dome ceilings and to sculpture. I mean, they're all so different. What was the evolution of your career?
Well, as an artist, and if you're trained, whether you're self-taught or academically trained, we all learn how to draw, paint, and sculpt. Now, I'll add photography into that too, because we have an ace photographer here also as a fine art. So my background, really my biggest interest was in printmaking. And you may have caught a glimpse of a few of my, I don't know if I had any prints up there, but my real love was intaglio printmaking. And when I studied in Italy, I really gravitated towards printmaking and a little painting and a little sculpture. So, I was able with ease to kind of graduate back and forth. A lot of artists stick to one medium, and I just was never satisfied doing that. I think some people in the room have some of my old prints, and they're high relief embossings, and they are radically different than the Mandarin prints, which are offset lithographs. They're commercially reproduced. But the original prints, if anyone in the room has those aren't plain. I think you have one, a monoprint. So that is a one-of-a-kind print that is one of one. That's it. Now, I may use the same template, but no print is the same. Now, when I was doing the Mandarin series, I created what is essentially an original print, and if you have a colored version of the Mandarin prints, that is indeed original print, because I painstakingly hand-colored each and every one of those prints that you have with pastels and colored pencils. And I still do that, like the ones you see up front. I hand colored those last week to bring here, so, you know, I'll find the time, my leisure time, and hand color Mandarin prints.
How old were you when you did that series?
I was 19. Yeah, it was a long time ago. So, and I'm 67 now. I know you're all getting, you don't have to guess anymore.
I have a question. We appreciate your 50 years. I know that I was here in the beginning. I'm not saying how old you are.
That's right.
But the part that I see is the educational part of this. Our children, my daughter has one of your prints, but never do they have the process from the beginning to see the actual mold and process to where it actually is delivered. And so what I'm hoping is that our children of Mandarin, they know your prints, but now they will be educated in the process of art and becoming structure and sculpture. And so how can we do that?
Well, I think what I mentioned earlier is that we're certainly in the conversation about me actually setting up a studio to sculpt in the old store and post office the figure of Harriet Beecher Stowe, and that will certainly be an educational experience because I will start with the armature. Remember, I'm not doing the shortcut with foam. I'm going to build the armature, and you will get to see the old-fashioned way that sculptors build armatures. And I make my own little pivoting joints out of epoxy, and so those details that go into the armature you'll get to see. I am going to build it out of wire and PVC. Again, the weight factor is always a concern with a life-size figure. And I'll use some steel in the pieces. But yes, you're right, the educational component here is really important. And so I hope we work out, you know, that I'll be down here a certain time, and I'm looking for models too. I need anybody with long billowing skirts and, you know, brocade and, you know, fancy buttons. Even in the country, I think Harriet Beecher Stowe had some lovely country wear. So, but I'll work all those out, those details, and work with the community. Hopefully we can interact on occasion and really make this a great experience for the community. And
Brenda, I'm sorry,
yeah.
I have to get back to Sandy's question for a minute, because the idea of going from making flat prints to making 3,800 square foot domes, 150 feet in the air, how did you make that transition? Do little domes?
Well, you know, when I owned a gallery in Atlanta, and I worked with a lot of designers, well, not just in Atlanta, but in Newark too, because I had a gallery there. And I had been working with designers all along, doing various commissions. And the pieces kept getting bigger and bigger. Back in Atlanta, the average home is 5,000 square feet. I was working in homes that were 20,000 square feet, and they had these elaborate domes, and, you know, and I said, well, I can paint something fabulous up there if you want, and that's how it all started. And you would have seen in the portfolio here a couple of the elaborate domes that I did in some of the Atlanta homes. Baseball players, music industry people, those kinds of, they wanted elaborate, they wanted flashy, and so I gave it to her. And I used a lot of gold and silver leaf back then. So that's one of the ways I transitioned into residential work, because I worked with so many designers. Making a living as an artist is one of the most challenging enterprises you can imagine. So I had to continually reinvent my work and what I was capable of. I had to constantly showcase that. And so even when I was in New York, I was exhibiting sculptural constructions, they were called. They would hang off of walls. So I'd always worked with copper and brass and light gauge metals, and that came out of printmaking because I worked with all those metals. And then I just kept getting more dimensional along the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
But it was just about building up a reputation, and I never said, no, I cannot not do that, of course. And the bigger the challenge, the more I jumped at it. And that's kind of what you have to do. Even in the market today, it's a difficult art market, so.
Could you say a little bit about the process by which you got the commission for Columbus?
Okay, well that's a good question. I think there are several in this room, my brothers, my sisters, helped me get through that process because there were 90 sculptures, national sculptors that competed for this commission. And remember, I don't have dozens of sculptures out there, you know, I have just a few. But what I had were concepts of sculptures that were planned, that I had planned, and for different cities when I compete nationally. So I competed for this, and I had a connection to Ohio, and that helped. But these processes, or governmental processes, there are almost, it's like going through a trial. You first make it to the semifinals, and I made it to the semifinals. Now, I had made it to the semifinals in a Central Park women's monument, but I didn't make the final cut in Central Park. So I was on the radar, and that's part of it. Once they saw that I had been in the finals for the women's monument in Central Park in New York, they said, oh, you know, that was part of it. And then probably helped I was a woman because it's a woman's monument. And I think what really, I think sold the deal was that I had to come up with a concept after I made it into the semifinals. So we all competed with each other once again. And I knew these sculptors, and they knew me. So we were all in this little collective, and it's like, oh, I hope you get it. I hope you get it. You know? And we're working like crazy. And, you know, I had everyone I knew in my network, look at this, what do you think of this? I mean, I had to go through my own evaluations. And then I made a 3D rendering of my model, and the others made scale models of clay. Well, mine was much more complex, as you saw in a lot of figures. Now, I did the clay models to begin with, and then I rendered them into a 3D program so that the people on the committee, and there were 6 different committees I had to go through. So each committee, I was able to show them this 3D rendering where they could walk through and walk around the sculpture rather than just pass a model around. And that's, I think, helped me seal the deal. And it's going to be a tremendously hard project in a lot of different ways. But it is going to be a very significant project, and I can't wait to get started on it.
When does that begin, Brenda?
Well, the process is beginning now. We're in the contract phase, so. But they already accepted my budget and my figures, and so that should go pretty quickly. But the contract phase has been 6 months, so that's kind of how long it takes, because, you know, we're dealing with a lot of government entities, and so. But I have time for the. Don't worry. Harriet Beecher Stowe, she's number 1. Sandy?
Jumping back to Harriet again. probably everybody doesn't know that this was all your idea. We didn't come to you and say, that was like out of our ballpark. And you came to us and said, tell us, when did you think of this? And when did you decide that this really needed to happen here in Mandarin?
Where is the lady here that read Palmetto Leaves recently?
That's what.
Were we talking about palmetto leaves earlier tonight? Yep, you. Right there, when I read Palmetto Leaves for the third time, gosh, Sandy, this has been, 3 years ago or so? And I thought, there's just not enough in Mandarin to give, create this grand legacy that she deserves. And after reading that book again, and I just came up with the idea. It was like an aha moment, and that's really how the concept began. And, coming to the museum on occasion and looking at the grounds and looking at the wonderful work you've done with the schoolhouse renovation, and I said, gosh, this project could be within reach, and somehow, some way, I'm going to make it happen. And, it does take a lot of determination, and I know you and I were just back and forth continuously, probably for another year. And then I finally said, well, Sandy, I'm going to start the sculpture. Well, Sandy said, well, I really don't want you to do that all your time. And I said, don't worry, I'm going to do this. And so, Sandy, I think the model helped a lot, and that was the first model. Then we showed it to the Stowe family descendants, and they were getting excited about it, and I got more excited because every time someone likes something, it's like, oh, good, because you can't please everyone all the time. And that's really how I conceived of it, was rereading Palmetto Leaves again. And if you haven't read that book, Beth, I know you read that recently, it's just phenomenal. And I just felt really strongly about continuing that legacy here and really putting her in a permanent status. And we have a gorgeous portrait here, which is phenomenal, but now we're going to have a bronze piece too that is going to be a permanent public art, and I really think it's going to attract a lot of attention. I hope it will. And Sandy, I think that you told me that Harriet Beecher Stowe, is likely going to be the pick of the most famous woman in Florida. Is that the award?
She was nominated.
Nominated,
Brittany
yeah.
nominated her. Yeah.
And so if that's the case, then we're really on the right track. So,
Well, I just hope that everybody in this room appreciates how much Brenda has done for this community and this project that she has come up with, and we all need to support it. And I don't know, Brenda, I love you, and I'm just so, thank you so much for this.
well, I'm going to make Now, you had a question, I think.
Well, actually,
Is it Sandy?
that Sandy's question, that was part of it, so. So
Okay.
I'll go ahead and ask, where is the foundry?
It's Carolina Bronze Foundry, and that's, I live in Blowing Rocks, so it is in Seagrove, North Carolina, if you know where that is. A little under 3 hours from me, so it's going to be convenient. Of course, once I finish the sculptures here, I will have them transported back to North Carolina. And now I normally work with American Bronze Foundry in Sanford, Florida, but I was a little disappointed in them for not matching the price, because we went out and got 3 bids, and I kept thinking Sanford, my old standby would match those bids, and they didn't. So I'm going to be working with Carolina Bronze Foundry, and they're great too, and we're going to have a great working relationship. But But Seagrove is famous for their pottery, and there's a lot of pottery workshops there in Kills. It's a very artsy area too. And you're all welcome to come see me in Blowing Rock when I'm up there too, because I'll be sculpting a few pieces of her, in the next few weeks up there too. So, well, thank you so much again. Thank you for your support and your patience, and I hope we haven't kept you too long. But thank you all for coming, and I'll be around for a few minutes. I may actually have a glass of wine.
And thank you all for coming. I wanted to present to you a couple of opportunities to support this truly monumental sculpture that Brenda has begun working on. First, all of the prints that Brenda has brought with her this evening that are priced in the back of the community club are for sale for you all, and some of them are original. I think there are a couple of original
Two original
drawings. And then some hand-colored prints and some other prints, and all of those that sell tonight, the proceeds will go directly toward this project. And then also you'll notice at the table in the back, we have a package of information here about Harriet Beecher Stowe and Mandarin and how you can support that. And I wanted to thank our supporters already who are in the audience. Ms. Rosemary McCorkle here, who has given us a very generous donation in support of this project already. So Ms. McCorkle, thank you so much. Sandy and Tracy Arpin and Claire King. I don't know if Claire could make it this evening. And then Mr. Jim Barker and his wife Sissy are generous supporters, as is Virginia Barker. And Cynthia Anderson. Are the Andersons here this evening? No. And then Pam Newman also is a very generous supporter of the project. And I had the whole list of supporters, and then I walked up here because I was so excited and to bring it. But I think I hit everyone. But thank you all who have supported the project already. And if we run out of packets, it is available on our website, and more information about Brenda as an artist. And then of course you can always grab one of Brenda's cards that she has, and that is a really great way to get in touch with her about how to support Harriet Beecher Stowe and Mandarin. But I really hope you enjoyed our program this evening. I enjoyed it immensely, and I'm so happy that Brenda gave us the step-by-step instructions about how to do this, because now I'm going to do my own life-size bronze sculpture. And you're all invited. It's going to be one of those where, nailed it, and you see mine, and it looks like, a little stick figure. Anyway, thanks for laughing at my joke. I get them from my dad. Thank you for coming this evening. Stick around, have another glass of wine, speak with Brenda, look at the prints, and we hope that you join us for another program. Stay tuned. When she is in the store and post office sculpting, we will send email notifications to each and every one of you so that you can be present for each step of that process. Thank you.